Oh, my cuffs are uncuffed. Oh my god, how embarrassing. Salutations. I'm Becca. This is Words Another Malarky. And today I am going to just rant positively about a book. I have no other reason for doing this video other than that I want to. I mean, this is like a recent book, but it's not like one that's being talked about a whole lot. But like I said in one of my previous videos, I don't do trends because I'm so hipster, but this one I had heard about because I think I saw it on a couple of booktuber recommendation videos, and I was like, that looks really great. And that book is it's a library copy, so it's probably gonna have a glare, but it is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Oh my god, if you're not interested, click away. You don't have to listen to me. But if you are even remotely curious as to what I have to say, stay tuned, because boy do I have some things to say. Okay, let me just preface with this, and this will probably pretty much sum it up, and then I'll continue talking. As soon as I finish this book, I wanted to start over and read it all over again. I cannot remember the last time that happened while reading. I loved this book so much, but I am also a critical reader, so I do have some things I'm going to talk about. But let's just start with me talking about everything I loved about An Enchantment of Ravens, because this book is like right in my wheelhouse. So this book is about a girl named Isobel. I assume it's probably pronounced Isabel, but I want to say Isobel, who is an artist, and she paints portraits for the fair folk, which are essentially fairies. They are a village that lives, I guess, particularly close to like the fairy realm, because they're apparently the only human village that fairies visit, and they visit because the fair folk are obsessed with human craft. They cannot make things, they can't cook, they can't sew, they can't paint or write or anything, so they go and buy things from the humans. And Isobel is like portrait artist number one, and she receives her first royal patron in the form of Rook the Autumn Prince. But unfortunately for her, she just so happens to paint human sorrow in his eyes, which is a no-no, because fair folk don't feel human emotions. It's embarrassing. In fact, it's basically treasonous. He could lose his title because they're not hereditary as a prince. So he shows up real angry, not even like, I want my money back, like, you're coming with me right now to the fairy world to stand trial for your crimes. So she ends up, basically being kidnapped by him. What's more charming than that? So they get attacked while they're on the road to her trial, and they end up like basically just having to help each other out because there's just something not quite right going on. There's all these things coming after Rook in particular, because he's been like opposing the Summer King, I suppose, for quite a while. So it becomes less about his temper tantrum and more about there's something wrong here and we're gonna have to depend on each other to survive. And they end up at the spring court, where she paints a bunch of portraits for people, and then shit goes down. Well, that was a great summary. So what I thought was going to happen was she was going to stand trial at the Autumn Court. We never actually see the Autumn Court. I don't know whether I like that or dislike that. I think I got enough autumnal imagery that I didn't care that we never saw the Autumn Court. Instead, we end up basically getting like a sampler pack of all 4 seasons, because they're in the summer realm, I think, and they get chased by a, fairy monster, and Rook gets very, very injured, and he's like, we gotta go to my realm where I can heal myself. And then they go to his realm, there's like a winter hunter that's after them, and she finds them, and he's like, we gotta go to the spring court where the winter court has the least amount of power. So they basically just hop realms, and like, I was able to forgive it for doing that, because that's kind of like a wishy-washy way of showing off fairy realms. It was just like we were there for like maybe half a chapter just so we could see, okay, yeah, there's like 4 realms, but we're going to spend most of our time in the spring realm, and then we get a lot of autumnal imagery because Rook has autumn powers. Obviously. Did we go to the winter world though? I don't remember. I feel like we're talking about Super Mario Brothers. Did I go to the winter world yet? Did I make it to that level? I don't know. I heard this described as purple prose, which essentially means like, it's overdone. I did not think it was overdone. In fact, I thought that writing was beautiful without being overbearing. I mean, it relied really heavily on seasonally based descriptions because you have this like emphasis on the 4 seasons, and you've got the autumn prints, and there was all this great autumn imagery. It's a very autumnal book. So purple, I mean, maybe, but the kind of purple that like I like a lot. It did not feel like too much. If you like a little more flowery, descriptive, but like very clear and focused writing, I really thought this was clear and focused, and it reminded me a lot of one of my favorite series, Princess of the Midnight Ball series, just the way that characters talked and their inner monologue. You're in Isobel's head, and I liked her a lot as a protagonist. She had a very like self-assuredness, and her resourcefulness, and the way that she handled Rook, where she just like wasn't gonna put up with none of that, bratty, pouty, sad boy prince stuff. And let me just talk about Rook. First of all, like I read some reviews where people took issue with their romance because he kidnaps her over really no other reason than his pride, and like won't let her go. But he does let her go, but she chooses to stay at first because it's like, well, if I leave, I'm dead, because there's like worse things out here that can kill me, and I'd rather take my chances with you. But then it becomes like they legitimately like trust each other and respect each other, because his reasons for taking her away were really out of fear, not so much like anger or pride. He was just like really afraid of getting killed by his own people over something as, natural, at least something that should be as natural as emotions, showing emotions. And I loved the romance. I thought it was so cute, and I am a big sucker for that kind of like, oh, he's not what I thought he was, or she's not what I thought she was kind of romance. And the banter was so charming, and I really fell in love with Rook as a male protagonist. He's like made my top 5 like easily. And obviously, because this wouldn't be this kind of story without it, it is illegal, like punishable by death, for a fair folk and a human to fall in love. I mean, duh, right? Naturally. So the reason he has human sorrow in his eyes, she learns, is because he had fallen in love with a human. But she didn't fall in love with him, so it wasn't breaking the law, technically, because apparently they have to fall in love with each other for it to be breaking the law. And you can guess what happens between Isobel and Rook throughout the course of the story, or else we wouldn't have much of a romance. But then it becomes clear, and so this is one of my problems with this book, is that it becomes somewhat clear that they do feel emotion, because otherwise how would Rook have like human sorrow in his eyes? They just forgot what it felt like, don't understand it, or don't want to understand it. Because what happens when they eventually get to the Spring Court, which is essentially their allies, Rook's allies, they justify Isobel being there by saying, oh, like, it's the hot new trend to have me paint you with human emotions. So she paints all these portraits with fair folk having human emotions, like emotions that they wouldn't show, like joy or whatever. And she talks about how they all have different reactions. Some thought it was really funny, and then others of them, especially the older ones, would just look like really depressed. And it wasn't developed as well as it maybe could have been. And me and my sister talked about this, because as soon as I finished this, I took this to my sister. And I probably haven't made this clear. I have 2 sisters, and they're both readers. I knew this would be right in my middle sister's wheelhouse, so I gave it to her. She read it. She loved it. She said, as soon as I finished it, I wanted to start it over again. And I'm like, that's exactly how I felt. And so then we gushed about it. And so talking to her about it, I realized, like, and she loved it just as much as I did, but like, you still have to, even your favorite books have flaws. So, and I understand why people wouldn't like this book if this isn't your kind of jam, this kind of whimsical, sweet, romantic, fairy tale type, purpley prose book. But oh my God, was it my thing? However, some aspects of the plot could have been way better developed. One being the fair folk and their relationship to emotions. Now, the way the story ends, you get the sense that like that relationship could be repaired. and it's probably going to be repaired. So the strengths of this book obviously are to me, its characters, the romance, Rook, 100 times Rook. I just really loved him as a protagonist. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Its descriptions, its imagery, and its overall tone. Yeah, the overall, trying not to say vibe, atmosphere of the book. But its weaknesses were in its plot. There were some plot holes, there were some weak plot elements to it, but I can forgive those because its strengths to me outweighed its weaknesses. And I think that's important to note about books that you really love or enjoy, or that you hear other people critique. Maybe you loved it and they hated it, is that one, obviously people aren't going to always jive with what you jive with. Number two, sometimes for them the weaknesses will outweigh the strengths, because there are books that I've read that have had strengths and weaknesses, and I couldn't get over the weaknesses. So is this a perfect book? No. Is there such thing as a perfect book? No. Did I absolutely enjoy every minute of reading this and want to own it so I can read it again because reasons I just said? Yes. And I am just super thrilled and like ecstatic to have fallen in love with a book again, because honestly it's been way too long since I've fallen this hard. If you are a fan of, I think you know what you have to be a fan of to enjoy this book. If you like fairy tale retellings, whimsical, cute, romantic, heavily reliant on imagery, involves morally ambiguous fairy people, I think probably a Court of Thorns and Roses fans would like this, but I'm never going to read that series for reasons I don't want to get into right now. So you probably enjoy this. Maybe I would enjoy a Court of Thorns and Roses, but I just don't want to go down that rabbit hole. This is enough for me. It's way shorter, only one book. And from what I know about a Court of Thorns and Roses, the relationship in this book is way healthier than the ones in that series. I've only ever listened to Rant reviews, so all I know are those, but I'm pretty sure there are some questionable relationships going on in ACOTAR. You can judge for yourself. So that's it. That's me just going off the rails about this book. Okay, yeah, I'm done. I can stop now. I have the power to stop. If you enjoyed this video, like it, comment on it, subscribe, maybe? I don't know, perhaps. And keep it weird also if you want to, and go read some books that make you happy, because that's really what this is all about, reading books that make you happy. I'm gonna go to bed now. Spoiler, Rook defeats the Summer King, who's corrupted and evil, and he becomes the new king of the four courts, essentially. Yeah, that's how that works, and takes her as his bride. So now he has a mortal bride. I don't know how it's going to work, honestly. Like, can they have children? Like, what happens when she gets old? Is he going to, like because she refuses to become a fair folk because then she has to give up her craft, and she won't give up her craft. But now she, it's not, once they get rid of the law, she can marry him, but like what happens like age-wise? Like, can he put like an enchantment on her that will like keep her from aging, but essentially like keep her human? Like, I don't know. But this is a standalone, so we don't get a series, we don't get these questions answered. There was like this kind of weird Deus Ex Machina thing that happened at the end where like, so the Spring Prince who welcomes them to his court, he like, surprise, I'm actually working for the Summer King, and y'all are in big trouble because you fell in love, and blah 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 blah. And then at the end he's like, surprise, I'm actually a good guy, and I've been planning to kill the Summer King for a long time, and you guys played right into my trap, ? Though it technically benefited everybody. And they're just like, how dare you fuck with our lives, but also like, thanks for saving our lives. I don't know, it was just really weird.